We come to this place for terror. We come to Sinful Cuts to scream, to laugh, to cry. Because we need that. All of us. That overwhelming dread we feel when the lights begin to dim and we go somewhere we've never been before. Not just terrified, but somehow possessed. Together. Horrifying images spoken directly into your ear. Kills that you can feel. Somehow, slaughter feels good in a place like this. Our slashers feel like the worst part of us. And stories feel insane and unstoppable. Because here, they are. Sinful Cuts. We make horror horrible.
Hey sinners, how you doing? I am Sean, and I'm here with
Shannon.
we have none other than Andy Davidson. We've already messed up our usual intro, but we're here with Andy Davidson, best-selling author. We're so happy to have you on tonight, Andy. We're going to be discussing the movie Near Dark. Before we get into that, though, what I would like to do, though, for our listeners out there, because I know we have a bunch of avid readers, is I'd just like to go over some of your novels, because I am a huge fan. So, Andy is the author of In the Valley of the Sun. This was the first one. I cut my teeth on this one. I guess pun intended.
I did too.
That was Andy's debut novel, and I think it's a wholly original take on a vampire novel, and it's so atmospheric, and I highly recommend it. Not just for people who love vampire novels or horror novels, but just people who love good literature. Next, we've got The Boatman's Daughter. I'm a chapter in, Andy, and I have to say, I was reading another book. I'm not going to mention the title because it's a fantastic book that I was reading. It's on a lot of year-end best lists for horror, but it just didn't click with me. You know, that's a me problem. That's not the author problem. It just didn't resonate. So I reached out, and you helped me out. I reached out to The Boatman's Daughter, and I literally got a paragraph in, and I was like, it's going to be okay. It's going to be all right. I am thoroughly enjoying it. And then lastly, we have The Hollow Kind. You know, Andy, people are going to think that I'm blowing smoke, but this was my favorite novel of I read it last year. I know it came out in 22, but this was my favorite novel of last year.
Thank you.
I can't say enough praise about this novel. I'm hoping, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm hoping that someone has reached out to you to adapt this into a limited series, because it would just, I'm thinking about it on HBO, 6 episodes, because there's so much there between the contemporary story and the story set in the past. It's just incredible. It's absolutely incredible.
Thanks.
So I wanted to give you all the praise in the world. And I'm not the only one. You know, you've got accolades from the New York Times, Esquire, the Wall Street Journal, the Chicago Tribune. You've ended up on NPR's Best Books of 2020 for The Boatman's Daughter. This is actually high praise for me. I know Sadie Hartman is a huge fan, and I'm a huge fan of Sadie's. So if she recommends, if she recommends something and says this has got to be on your TBR, it gets bought that day.
Sadie has real power that way.
Right?
Yeah.
She really does. So just to let you know, Sadie is she's going to be on in a couple of months. And and Emily Hughes is going to be on as well. Mm-hmm. And I know Emily is a huge fan. So we're happy to have those two guests on, but we've got you here tonight and we want to talk about Near Dark, and let's just get into it, shall we?
Absolutely.
All right. So, I mean, the most basic question though, that I've got to ask Annie, is that we sent you a list of movies for the entire year. I mean, there's damn near 25 movies on there. Why Near Dark?
Almost out of a sense of obligation when I saw it was on the list. Near Dark is a horror movie that I genuinely love. So much so that I think it played a great deal into the writing of In the Valley of the Sun, in terms of like several different ways. Like there was the whole Western mythos meets the vampire mythos. Put those two things together, horror in the West and Western. I just think those are amazing when you combine them, because there's so many like great themes that you can explore, like loneliness and isolation and the frontier, violence. But also, Near Dark is a movie that I didn't see when it came out. It came out in '87, I think, and I saw it when I was in graduate school, so I was probably in my mid to late 20s, which that's 20 years ago now at this point, and for 20 years that movie stayed in my head, and that's what a great movie does, right? And so yeah, Near Dark was the one that I felt like I could talk the most about without embarrassing myself, basically.
You nailed it, though, especially with In the Valley of the Sun, as it correlates to Near Dark, the desolation. Mm-hmm. Like the scenes that you describe in The Valley of the Sun, just, like, I don't want to call it the wasteland. I don't want to upset any of our listeners who may live in these places, but just that like that open country, and just that there's no one around for miles and miles, and that like inherent loneliness that comes with that. Mm-hmm. We're here in New York. We don't necessarily. I mean, we're on Long Island. We definitely don't have any of that. I mean, we're stacked like cordwood here. It feels like most days, but we've got John Langan is coming on next week, and I know that I believe he lives in the Hudson Valley, but there are places in the Hudson Valley that are incredibly different, but so similar as well. It's just that desolate loneliness, like just wide open country, and there's nothing around for miles, and it's so beautiful. But I also find that those places they can be so terrifying as well.
Mm-hmm. I always think of the Hudson Valley as kind of the cradle of civilization when it comes to horror in American lit, with its roots back in like Washington Irving and that sort of thing. Yeah. So yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, we Shannon and I were talking about a road trip next fall. We're going to go to Salem soon because they have the Salem Horror Fest, but we're definitely going to do a little road trip around late September, early October to Sleepy Hollow, because we're lucky enough to almost have it in our backyard. So it's always a good trip.
Yeah.
That's nice.
I found interesting about it's okay. What I found interesting about this movie about locations is that so it's supposed to be set in Oklahoma, right? And they actually tried filming there, and they I want to say like a week prior to starting, maybe even less, Oklahoma actually had a very devastating flood, to the point all the sets were absolutely destroyed. So they actually had to relocate to Arizona. And it was supposed to be, I think, summertime in like the Midwest anyway. And they get to Arizona, and Arizona has a first on record snowstorm. So like it was just so weird, like the elements like playing against them. So like just sometimes the elements themselves can be scary and devastating, because like how scary is a freaking flood, but I'm just with that in all that and knowing that in mind, Catherine Bigelow still set forth and hurried up, rebuilt the sets and to where they needed to go, and wherever they found it in Arizona, and still made the film, and it still worked beautifully. So it was definitely really meant to be. I just found that really interesting.
It is interesting when you think about like I had forgotten, I hadn't seen it in a while. I rewatched it a few days ago for this, and I had forgotten that the movie is not set in Texas. In my imagination, it was always Texas, but and so they live in Oklahoma. The family lives in Oklahoma. Caleb and his dad, right? And they go east into Kansas.
It's got to be, because he takes that
Kansas
bus.
Is where
when he tries to get back home, he's actually got to jump on like a Greyhound, and it's a long journey. So I think he's definitely crossed state lines for sure.
And I know the father thinks they went south. when the father starts to pursue them. And so to your point, Shannon, like it's just this big West, like it's this American land. It's not even in the imagination, you know. It's amazing that Arizona is standing in for Oklahoma, and in Oklahoma, in my imagination, it was Texas, and so it's just this kind of big mythic swath of the American West, essentially. Yeah.
You know, to both your points, there's just so much geography there because I mean, I hate to show my age to the two of you because it's always so embarrassing for me how old I am. But I did see this. I saw this in '87, Port Washington movie theater here on Long Island, and I mean, it blew me away because this was 2 months after The Lost Boys came out, and The Lost Boys, just everybody was talking about it. Yeah, I mean, look, it's a big studio film. Tons of marketing. It had the Coreys in it, so come on, how can you not love it? Yeah, you know, and a great soundtrack, and you know, just there was a lot of money pumped into it, and I love The Lost Boys. But when this movie came out 2 months later, I was like, oh, I think I found my people. I think I found, you know, I mean, this movie just really resonated with me because up until then, I mean, the closest that my favorite vampire movie had probably come out 2 years prior, which would have been Fright Night, which I absolutely love. But it's high camp, you know, it's a different kind of movie. And prior to that, it was, you know, Hammer Horror and the Universal movies and maybe some Amicus Pictures and American International Pictures. But there was nothing that felt like, holy cow, are vampires real? I mean, should I be concerned?
It had a more humanistic element to it regarding, like, the core was the family. Even, you know, Catherine Bigelow, you know, made a point to say that. And I totally see that in the film. You know, even Joshua John Miller, he was great. You know, he was only what, like 10, 11, maybe?
Yeah, I think I maybe
pretending
12
to smoke a
max.
cigarette, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the Homer character is my favorite character, actually. I mean, one of the things that I think, as you said, makes it seem as if vampires could be real about the film is there's a verisimilitude to the world. I think about the scene where at the vending machine with Homer and Caleb's sister, where he's a vampire who claims to be an old man trapped in a child's body. I mean, he's aged. Obviously, he was turned when he was a child, but he's grown older in his mind, right? But throughout the film, he does a lot of things that sort of contradict that idea about him being an old man. He acts like a child. And so there's this great thing where he, instead of attacking her at the vending machines or taking her back to the hotel room and then attacking her with the family, he actually does want to watch television with her when he invites her to come back and watch TV. And so they sit down in front of the TV and he's watching TV with her. And when the station goes off the air and you see the flag waving, he's sort of frantically turning the channel, trying to find something else because he wants to watch TV with someone. He wants to have that little moment. So it's that kind of thing, like taking that seriously.
Yeah.
You know, like it's just kind of wonderful about the film.
I love the fact that he's so desperate to have, I think Sarah is the sister. He's so desperate for her not to leave because he's just, even though, you know, he's an old man in this, you know, young boy's body, you know, no one around him is like him. You know, he's always going to be the outsider. So I'm with you on that. I like Homer a great deal as well.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's okay with you two, I just want to go over the hard yards real quick about, you know, how the movie came to be real quickly. So Catherine Bigelow had directed The Loveless, starring Willem Dafoe, but she had co-directed that. So this was going to be her first solo directing effort, and she's friends with James Cameron. I don't know if they were dating at the time. They would eventually get married for 2 years, which we like to call the Jim Cameron special, a good 2-year marriage. And he basically gave her, you know, his crew. You've got Bill Paxton, Lance Henriksen, Jeanette Goldstein. He said, look, use my ensemble. They're seasoned. They know what they're doing. You're not going to have to worry about them. So that's going to be off your plate because they'll show up ready to play. The cinematographer, Adam Greenberg, had done Terminator, and then he would eventually do T2 and movies like Ghost. So she borrowed the cinematographer as well. And then as well as some of the executive producers. And I think it all worked out beautifully. I mean, really, really. Jim Cameron, I suppose, is a great friend to have in that situation. But to be able to tap into like almost a ready-made crew, and Shannon, to your point, with all these technical disasters that happen with the weather and the sets, I think a lot's to be said about the fact that she had such a seasoned crew behind her. Just pick up, all right, we'll rebuild the sets, and we're ready to go. And I think you can see it on screen. Yeah. It doesn't feel like a first movie.
There's something so funny too. No, it's funny. There's something so funny too about that. Can you believe Lance Henriksen almost didn't do this? He was like,
they gave it to Michael Biehn and he passed.
And Bill Paxton was the one who convinced him read the script. Lance Henriksen got the most involved in his character, which is why he was, even though everyone is great, he was probably the best character because he went so deep into creating his own self-story. Do you guys know the story about the hitchhiker, by the way? Not in the film. So when they got relocated to Arizona to begin filming, Lance, he started doing things like growing out his hair, showering less and less. He got acrylic nails that he got put on, broke off. So he got, little rugged looks to his hands. And then he decided to drive all the way by himself to this place just to kind of have that drifter driving experience and rugged look to him. And so he saw a hitchhiker on the way and picked him up. And he decided to practice his character with the hitchhiker in the car. And he told, basically what he does in the film, the long staring at you, the just saying I don't think he said your face is going to look great when it's ripped off. He didn't say things like that, but he made the guy was rolling a cigarette. And he's like, you're doing it wrong. Do it again. Something along those lines. So he's just really freaking him out. And he's like, yeah, he was really freaked out. So I knew I did really good with my character. So
I'm huge. I adore Lance Henriksen. But Lance Henriksen dressed as an accountant, I'm not getting in the car. As a vampire? Are you kidding me?
I just thought that was so fun. If I didn't like the man already, I'm but
yeah, he's really great in this. The stuff with his sort of, he projects something in that character. And it's Jesse. I forget his last name off the top of my head. It's
Hooker.
Jesse
Lee Hooker.
Jesse Lee Hooker. Yeah. He projects something that's so kind of old and at the same time paternal, strangely paternal as the leader of that group, but not in a kind of stereotypical way. He's not an abusive father. He has a very sort of hands-off approach to parenting in a way. It's you turned him, he's got so many days to get his act together and drink blood and make a kill, or he's done for, but it's your responsibility. It's just it's a wonderful character. It's very holistic the way he's come at him. It's not just a one note thing. He's a gunslinger or a soldier. Yeah. He's so many different has so many things.
Layers.
I agree. It's very layered. Yeah. It's definitely very layered, and he does not say much. He plays off wonderfully with Bill Paxton because they're basically at opposite ends of the spectrum in this movie. I mean, Bill Paxton, who could very well be my favorite actor. R.I.P. Still not over it. But they're at such opposite ends of that spectrum, but it works so well in the movie because you do have Lance Henriksen grounding everything, like you said, that paternal figure, and he's leading his little troop. And Jeanette Goldstein, I actually find the relationship between Lance Henriksen and Jeanette Goldstein very endearing, especially their death scene when she just, they don't even look at each other. They're just looking at it. They know it's over. And she just says fun times, it gets me every time. I love the dynamic of the vampire family. I hope you don't both gang up on me, but I really feel that the weakest part of the movie are the lovers. Not that they don't have not that they're, I mean, look, it's hard. It's hard when you have three character actors like, Paxton and Goldstein and Henriksen. When you're played against that, I think it's almost unfair, But yeah, Caleb comes off a little boring in comparison, because he's the one who's got to move our story along, so he doesn't really get to have. He's so reactionary. He doesn't really get to have the flashy part, which I always have a space in my heart for, because when you're the straight man, you don't get to have the funny lines. That's the hardest job on set, I suppose. But yeah, Caleb, unfortunately for me, is probably the weakest part. But it's hard when you have such a dynamic vampire family.
How do you compete with Bill Paxton and his character that he came up with? How do you can't beat that or overshadow that? You can't.
No.
I would just say in defense of Caleb that, like, you need the Bill Paxton character, right, to play against that. So like if Caleb weren't Caleb, then the Bill Paxton character Severin might not seem so broad and frightening. He might seem silly in a way that, he's obviously gets laughs in the film for the things he does. He's being over the top sometimes, but at the same time, he's really frightening. And it's because Caleb is so normal and so kind of just this white bread kid from the Dust Belt, that I think it really works. So I don't know. Like I like the romance in the film, and I think part of it is because the acting is so good. Even if the characters are a little bit thinner, and I think you're right, they certainly don't have the layers maybe that the other characters do. But I think that when you look at the way the directing and the visuals support that romance. So like, I'm thinking about the whole early courtship scene where the first few shots in the film are about Caleb when he wakes up from his nap and he slaps the bug on his wrist and he gets in his truck at sundown and he drives off to find trouble in a small town on a Saturday night or whatever. And there's this kind of restless energy that the film has, like these short shots and these quick cuts.
Yeah.
And he gets into the scrap with the kids who are, I guess, friends of his, but it's unclear. Like, are they friends in that sort of, it's almost like a pack of dogs nipping at each other the way
It feels like he's stuck with them.
Yeah. And they almost get into it,
Yeah.
but it's over nothing. And so there's this sense of energy that he has. And then when we see
May,
it's May, right?
Yeah.
May. Yeah. When we see May for the first time through his point of view, suddenly it's slow motion. Like it's just this really subtle slow motion shot of her walking out on that sidewalk with the ice cream in her hand. And it's like everything just slows down in his world. And the movie is full of what for me are those kinds of lyrical touches that come about in an almost poetic way through the camera, through the directing, through Bigelow. And so I love her as a director. I think she's fascinating. She's really great. And she does such interesting stuff. But Near Dark is my favorite of her films because it has so much. I just like, there's poetry in it, you know. There's real poetry to the way she directs in this film.
Oh, I couldn't agree with the two of you more. I mean, you can really see it. This is the foundation of what she would then go on to do in the movies that followed. But again, I still can't wrap my head around that this was. I know she co-directed The Loveless, but this was really a solo effort. Her first go at it. It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. Andy, here we go. It's the letting Charlie out.
Oh, okay.
Out you go. There you go, pal.
But
it's just psychologically, my dog makes me feel like I'm not interesting when he leaves halfway through the podcast. I do everything for this dog. He can't do me one favor and stick around for an hour.
It's okay. It gave me a really good look at your posters behind you, which are amazing.
Yeah. It's I don't know if my wife is thrilled with the purchases every now and then. She's very supportive, very, very supportive. But she's like, anything shows up in a cylindrical tube, I have some explaining to do. But we all have our passions. But Andy, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. I'll apologize for it. I'm going to put you on the spot because you're our author. Because we're talking about the characters. You have our lovers, and you have then our family. We'll call them that. As an author, do you find that it's more exciting to write the villains? Like those Bill Paxton-ish and Lance Henriksen type of characters because there's so much meat on the bone, so to speak, or do you like to write the quieter characters that drive the story forward?
It's not so much a preference as to one or the other, like which one do I like to write the better of the two. But I would say that the quieter characters who drive the story forward, the good characters, are always harder to write.
Yeah.
Sometimes the villains write themselves. And when they do things, you always know why they do them. The villains have a clear motivation. They're always certainties in your head. And the good characters are much more difficult, especially when you're dealing with characters who you don't really know what they want. In the case of like the two main characters, the lovers in this film, Caleb and May, it's clear what each one wants, although they don't seem to know what they want until they find it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I mean, the beautiful thing about the horror genre is that the good characters can be villains too. There's no, or at least they can have aspects of the bad, right? So nobody in life is 100% one way or the other. The dichotomy of dark and light is something we kind of assign happily to fantasy or something, I think in horror, part of the pleasure of that genre for me is that everyone somehow is bad, whether it's the way they treat their kid or the way they ditch a friend somewhere or leave someone dangling for something, or they don't do something they're supposed to do, or they just have dark, horrible thoughts that they don't tell people about. Yeah. That genre. And in this movie, I think you were talking about what's weak about this film. For me, I've always had a question over the ending of this film in my mind.
Let me hear it.
Well, we don't often see, and this is you could praise the film for this too, that it's very rare. I can't think of any other examples off the top of my head where you see a cure for vampirism introduced in the third act, right? Yeah. Where they get a happy ending. And Bigelow does it well. And I think it's an interesting idea that's introduced because there is that precedent for it, like in Stoker with blood transfusions and whatnot, but they don't work,
Yeah.
So I do question that aspect of the film because it is a horror film. And I wonder about that. I've always wondered about the ending of the movie, if that was always an Eric Red script, or if someone came to him and said, this would be better if they live and they get to be, people. So I don't know. I mean, certainly with Caleb, that works in the third act because he gets to be the hero. But there is almost nothing he does as a vampire in the third act that he couldn't have done, or as a person that he couldn't have done as a vampire in the third act, in standing up to the family and whatnot.
Yeah, totally.
So
agree.
anyway,
No, I was just saying that it's a really good question. It is interesting, especially when you think about the dynamics of the cure. I mean, if there is a cure, I mean, Daybreakers came up with, oh, you just got to burn in the sun for 3 seconds, and so I don't know if that's any better or worse. I guess I don't know. I guess because just me and not thinking about it, my mind is actually literally going right now. But I don't know. I guess it's because it started off as like a hybrid film, and like they never really. It almost like they never really went full vampire. If that makes any sense. I know we did the sunlight thing. They could. I mean, spitting out bullets, I think was different, right? That's not really something I really saw before. And they never say the words. To my knowledge, they don't have teeth. They don't have, like, everything about a vampire is kind of thrown out, other than the immortality and the sunlight aspect of it.
There's almost no mythology that we like. The typical mythology that we grew up on with the hammer and the universal. There's almost none of that in the movie, except for, you can turn and bleed a person. I mean, Jesse's got crosses on his revolvers. I don't know that. I really didn't look to see if there's any reflection, but they just do away. Catherine Bigelow said they just want to do away with all of the pre-existing mythology and kind of create their own.
I think that was a part,
and they really did.
Yeah, I think that was just a part of them creating their own version of whatever this creature technically was. We know it more of a vampiric aspect, but like it's never mentioned in the film. They don't ever say it, right? Like what we are, we're just, right? They just,
Yeah, that was one of the things that I stole from this film for my book, In the Valley of the Sun, was just don't use the word. And I think that was partly a practical decision on my part, because you can't get a literary agent to read your book if you query them telling them you've written a vampire novel. But maybe that's changed now. I don't know. But I was thinking about the ending too, in light of what you're saying, Shannon. It's like you could almost read the ending of this as ambiguous in a way. I mean, there's a question of if they are returned to this normal state as humans. There's a shot at the end. I think it's May's face has this very sort of, she kind of cringes away from the light when she sees it for the first time, and he tells her it's okay, and they embrace. But I do sort of remember this moment of this idea just in my head of like, well, will it be okay? Did this really work?
Will
or
it
is
revert
this,
back?
Could this have...
Yeah, it could revert back. It's,
And what is she losing? As a character, what is she losing by becoming human again? When we first meet her, she's so in love with the night and the idea of how things sound and feel and smell, and it's
Andy, did you see Mike Flanagan's Midnight Mass? I feel like he's a big Near Dark fan, because it seems like he did visually what May describes in the movie. How when in Midnight Mass, sorry sinners, spoilers for Midnight Mass, well, not whole spoilers, but yeah, you should watch it. But when people are turned and they go out into the night, everything is like, there's halos around everything. It's just visually spectacular. He really sells it that it's not that bad to be. Besides killing people and drinking blood, it's not that bad to be a vampire. I mean, it's just euphoric. Right. I thought he really, really nailed that. But I want to circle back real quick to one tidbit that I picked up in the research for the film, and Andy, this goes to your point about, did Eric Red have a different ending in mind? Because there is an alternate script version where Sarah, the sister, because she's taken by Homer, after the conclusion of the vampire family is destroyed, they go back to the house and Sarah walks out into the daylight and starts to burn. So it alludes to the fact that she's been turned by Homer. So I'm thinking there's the framework there that there was more of a nihilistic ending, than what we saw, which, as a horror fan, I'm all for that. The bleaker and more, and if everyone can be sad at the end of the movie, that's where I'm at, unfortunately.
Blackout's daughter.
Do you know? Did they film that?
They didn't. No, it was just on the page. Oh, but so what they had done though is I guess this was after either the final script that they shot or after it was actually shot, because what they had done was they painted themselves in the corner because they're like, there's no stakes to this because she can just be cured with a transfusion now, because that's where that's the groundwork that we've laid out. So, but I'm with you though. I think these are half measures, but I do love the fact that they do away with all of the mythology and they do create their own, and it really, it presents vampirism as not a supernatural phenomenon, but more this is a true disease. And this came out in 1987, so we were still very well in the throes of the AIDS epidemic. So this is very much a metaphor for that. You've got your two lovers meeting and it's more stolen kisses and not full sex, but they're young, stupid kids, and they're making
it's a very chaste romance in that regard. But she wraps it all up. They wrap it all up in the sort of trappings of a fairy tale in the end too. That just sort of occurred to me, that you essentially have the prince saving the Sleeping Beauty character here, from eternal sleep in a kind of metaphorical way at the end of this. And
it could have been just a way to bookend like the story, like where, it started off with them. This is why Caleb ended up where he was. Then we deal with the core, which is the family, and then but it ends with them essentially, because it started with them. So I'm wondering if it's just kind of wanted to go. Does that make sense? I don't know. If Bigelow just wanted to chose to do that kind of ending for that reason. So that's kind of how I saw that, honestly.
Let me ask you two, did you two like the fact that the gender roles were really swapped, because we had a female vampire turning a male, where typically, for decades, it was the exact opposite?
Yeah, I liked it enough. I stole it from my book. So, yeah.
I'm wondering now if it was an inspiration to let the right one in.
Mate, oh boy! No, now you got my head spinning. How do you like that film, Andy? Do you like that?
I love it. I like the original Swedish film and the novel immensely. The remake, the American remake that Matthew Vaughn did, I think. Is okay. It's okay, but there's a lot more complexity in the Swedish film,
for sure.
Yeah, and there's a whole sequence in that film in the book, I think, more so than in the film, actually, that inspired part of In the Valley of the Sun too. So, yeah, I was reading everything I could get my hands on. I was watching everything I could get my hands on when I wrote that book, and so all of this stuff kind of like seeped in there. But yeah, I love those films, especially the first one.
Here I am putting you on the spot again, but I have to ask. I have to. Okay, besides the films that we just discussed, Let the Right One In and Near Dark, what other vampire films are you just absolute fan of?
Um, I'm a big Hammer fan, so anything with Christopher Lee, pretty much. Although they get kind of goofy, but The Horror of Dracula is hands down my favorite Dracula film. I like not Stoker, Coppola's Dracula,
Me too.
Bram Stoker's Dracula. I'm a big fan of that. I'm a huge Keanu Reeves apologist for Jonathan Parker. Anybody who says that movie is not better for having Keanu Reeves in it is wrong. Yeah, you mentioned you mentioned Lost Boys. I'm a big fan of that. Fright Night, those are great. I'm trying to think if there's anything kind of weird or obscure off the top of my head. I can't, but I like the was it 1978 adaptation of Salem's Lot for TV?
Oh, please. That's catnip for me. Are you kidding me? And the one thing about Salem's Lot that always gets me is that Toby Hooper is, when people mention Salem's Lot, they hardly ever mention Toby Hooper, you know? And he did such a bang up job on that miniseries. It was so great. Again, I'm gonna show it's such a sad night for me because I'm showing my age all over the place. That miniseries came out, and I think it was on CBS, and CBS did something that I will never forgive them for. They debuted it on a Monday, and then they showed the second part on a Thursday. It was so far apart, like, you know, it makes my teeth hurt to this day. But I guess in my heart I'll forgive them at some point, but not yet. But Salem's Lot is a huge, huge one for me. Oh, okay. So let me ask the both of you. With vampires, it seems like we have two different camps. Well, three really. You've got, like your novel, you kind of create your own. You know, you create a little bit of a Nosferatu and a little bit of a contemporary, and you mix that together. But you have your master Nosferatu vampires from like Salem's Lot and Nosferatu, of course. Then you've got, going all the way forward, you've got your Twilight and your Interview with a Vampire and the seductive vampire, and even Bela Lugosi. I mean, he had heads swooning all over the place back then. So, what is your vampire? For me, I do appreciate the more, the Nosferatu, the real. There's no seduction whatsoever. It's just I went down the wrong corridor and now I'm going to pay for it dearly.
Well, this is going to be funny. I guess I would have two answers. Like, there's the inner child. So the inner child says my vampire is Dracula in the Monster Squad. Actually,
Monster Squad.
Okay.
Bye to you.
Who's just straight down the road, the cliche sort of rebirth of the Bela Lugosi Dracula, right? Like, he's got the medallion, he's got the Count's outfit, everything. But he's terrifying in a way that Lugosi never is.
Oh, he's nasty business. Yeah.
Yeah, I think about that scene at the end where he grabs the little girl and holds her up and says, "Give me the amulet, you bitch." And it's so terrifying because he hisses at her with his teeth, and it's like nothing I've ever. I still, to this day, I don't think I've ever seen anything.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's horrifying. So there's that. Like, that's everything that Dracula, that vampire can be. And then there's, I don't know if there's a prototype for it. I mean, there's May in Near Dark, or I've seen every episode of Buffy, and I'm trying to think of like maybe the Drusilla vampire, the sort of gothic –
Yeah.
vampire, the willowy gothic vampire. There's the, I don't know, maybe the Drusilla vampire, the sort of gothic vampire, the willowy gothic vampire. There's the, I don't know, maybe the Drusilla vampire, the sort of gothic vampire. There's the, I don't know, maybe the Drusilla vampire, the willowy gothic vampire. There's the, but when I was writing Rue, I was just thinking more along the lines of like, what kind of, what would a vampire be who is out on her own in a wilderness, in a place that's inhospitable to her, where the sun shines so bright. And I think it's just pure predator,
Mhm.
you know, like a survival instinct. And so, I don't know. There's those opposite ends of the vampire is just the pure monster that is out to drink blood. And then there is the sort of archetypal vampire that
It
has
could
potential
be.
too. So
No, it's okay. I was just gonna say, like, I think lately for me, maybe because of how it probably is Twilight's fault. Not gonna lie. That I've like it's like the whole like seductiveness. Like, there's definitely still some good stories that involve that. But I'm thinking of more converting more to like just like the monster like that. That's like the best part I think about Let the Right One In. Right, that she's alone. She you know, in the book anyway, she only comes across one vampire in her 250-year span. So like they're very rare, they're very unknown. Like nothing's known about them. So it just has a more like intrigue, I guess, the mystery to me. And then you have ones like 30 Days of Night, where they're just they're
Oh,
like rabid rats on yeah, like,
apex
and they were
predators.
just so exciting
Yeah.
to me. Constantly hunting, and yeah, that was I love that film. And I'll always go back to the boys too, because they were just, you know, they were predators too. They just had a little bit more fun because they were, you know, 80s, you know. You
Hey, that's my generation. You leave that to me.
know. I was
well,
alive then, okay? You just
I was just thinking like the vampire is a chameleon. It can be anything and everything. It's a great, you know, when you think about a monster like a werewolf, it's a little harder to hang a lot of different metaphors on a werewolf. A werewolf is pretty much one to two things about humanity. If you want to do a sort of metaphoric thing, which is not to disparage werewolves. There's some wonderful werewolves out there, but when you're dealing with vampires, they can be so much. I mean, thinking about Lost Boys, you've got the punk rock sort of rejects from society. Near dark, you've got the sort of family unit that's nomadic and dispossessed. I don't know. I mean, there's something almost like, I don't know, Steinbeckian about that.
Right?
So, yeah, I mean, it can go so many different
yeah.
ways with vampires.
The only successful vampires that I know of are it's Interview with a Vampire. You know, someone who took their skill set and made a fortune off of it. You know,
Mhm.
I always have a bit of a problem with the seductive vampire. Although, let me tell you, I mean, Christopher Lee, I'll kiss his face all day long, and the litany of Hammer horror beauties that turned into vampires. Please, I can't get enough. But I always think that underneath that, it's like it's a person mask, because underneath that they're dead. And it's not their real face. And I think that Let the Right One In showed this very subtly in the film, that you could see the true nature of Ellie with like when she's licking the blood and the elongated tongue, or the shining eyes like a raccoon or a dog. I always know in the back of my head, I'm like, oh, this, as good looking as it is in the front, deep down, it's no bueno.
Very dark. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Not to say that if a Hammer horror beauty, came and wanted to bite my neck, or Christopher Lee, I'll take all comers. Have at it. It's very delicious white Irish skin. It's all yours.
Speaking of white Irish, we've left out in our recitation of vampires Colin Farrell, of course, from the remake of Fright Night. Pretty effective remake, actually.
I loved
If we're
it.
just, yeah.
I really, really did. It kind of got the. Well, you know what? I think it did okay, but I think people tend to lean more into the '85. But I thought it was fun. I thought he was just having a blast.
Well, and it's another example too of how you can take a vampire and just put something else on him. So, in this, it's sort of this tale of like the neighbor, the man who lives next door, who's mysterious, and that itself is a trope that's in horror down through the ages for various types of stories. So the scary neighbor next door, but yeah. So I'm going to ramble about that one, but yeah.
That's okay. Shannon's used to it with me as her co-host. But let's wrap up the movie portion with just unfortunately the movie took a bit to find an audience. In '87 it got released. It did come out 2 months after Lost Boys, so it was let's see, it was $5 million budget, and I think it made 3.5 domestically. So it wasn't a hit. Like a ton of the movies that we talk about on this podcast, it took decades to find an audience, but it really has. It absolutely has. I mean, it's listed on horror movies the top 10 of horror movies that you may have missed that you absolutely need to see. Some of the best horror movies that have ever been made. I mean, Catherine Bigelow has gone on to incredible success. I hear Jim Cameron's done okay, for his contribution to it. So I'm always elated when a film like this finally finds its audience and its home, which it did. So that'll wrap up Near Dark. Now we're going to get into fun for me and Shannon. I don't know about for you, Andy, but we get to ask you our 3 stupid questions. So the first one would be, give us your scariest horror movie experience. Now, it could be the film itself, where you saw it, how you felt afterwards. Have at it.
When I was, I took a year between my undergraduate degree and my graduate degree. So I was living at home with my parents for about a year, doing a job on campus, like with PR or something. And so I would have these days, at least 2 days a week, where I wouldn't have to drive into campus. And one of the things that I spent my time doing was sitting in my room watching rented movies from the video store in town. And for some reason, I don't know why, I had made it to my 23rd year on Earth without seeing The Exorcist.
Oh, no.
And I was sitting at home alone watching The Exorcist, and I want to say it was the director's cut or some kind of DVD that had come out that with extra footage. And there's the scene when Reagan comes down the stairs with her head backwards, or she's on her hands. It's very horrific and grotesque, and she's contorted. And I had an actual physical reaction where I recoiled from the screen. And the only other time that's ever happened was when I saw Twin Peaks for the first time.
Okay.
It was a few years later, and I was watching an episode on VHS that I had borrowed from a friend, and it was the episode where Bob finally shows up in Laura Palmer's bedroom. And he comes over the edge of the bed. We see him. No, it's the couch. We see he's in the living room. We see him, and I think it might be Sarah Palmer that sees him. I don't know if it's Laura, but we see him at one end of the room, cut back to Sarah. Then he's closer to the camera. He's behind the couch. And then suddenly he's crawling over the couch. And that scared the bejesus out of me. And I did the same thing where I kind of just drew back from the TV.
Recoil,
yeah, that's a very rare reaction from me, but it's happened twice in my life. So there it is.
Aren't horror movies great?
Mm-hmm.
It's just the best. Okay, so question number 2. Give us a movie that people generally think is pretty bad, but you'll defend to the death.
Howard the Duck.
Oh, that's a great answer. That's a wonderful
love it.
answer. I love that movie.
Okay. That is a great answer.
Easiest question in the world.
I wonder if he's going to have the same answer for question number 3.
Next question.
Andy, I'm going to bug you now for weeks and months and possibly years to get back on this podcast, and we're going to do a Howard the Duck.
I would absolutely
I
love
would
to
love
discuss
that.
Howard
All
the
right.
Duck.
I would love
Absolutely.
Consider it done. I cannot wait. All right, Howard. Yeah. I love that you had that one already in. You had that holstered. You were ready.
I've had that question put to me before. My wife and I, we go on road trips. We play games. One of the things we play is name 5 movies that everyone says is crap that you love. And Howard the Duck
That's
is always
amazing.
at the top of that list.
So wonderful
yeah,
answer.
that one-
I'm jealous of his answer.
Easy.
That's fantastic. I know. You and I hemmed and hawed forever. Okay, now the third question is a remake that you would love to see happen. You could just do the remake, but if you want to get into the weeds of it, who directs it? It can be living or deceased, and who stars in it, again, can be living and deceased. Or deceased.
Well, we're actually already getting a remake of Nosferatu directed by Robert Eggers.
Yeah,
So
very excited.
I'm not. That might have actually been one of my answers. A remake of anything, and whoever could
Your
direct it
fantasy
directs it.
football movie.
Don't have-
Yeah.
That's a tough one. Trying to think of movies that I feel like weren't done right, and it's most of the movies I love, I always feel like they were done right, or they were done the way they should have been done. I'm very much accept the thing for what it is and judge it for whether it works or not on its own kind of standards. So that's a tough one for me.
There's a couple of those 70s, because I know you're a Hammer fan like I am. There's a couple of those early 70s Hammers that I wouldn't mind having another go at. Scars of Dracula comes to mind. Possibly
Dracula 1978.
AD.
That one.
Yeah.
The poster for that has all the promise in the world. It's an amazing poster. A friend and I have had this conversation, but the movie is does not live up to the poster kind of thing, I think. So maybe something like that. But again, it's like, I'm such a, this is even a hard thing for me to do hypothetically, because I do sort of sincerely believe in the thing that existed when it existed is the thing that it
leave
is.
it alone. I get that.
We should love it and respect it. So
I absolutely get that.
Yeah, when we talked about it the last time, I think I was just going on with like, what haven't we seen in a while, and maybe enough time has passed. So it's not that I want it to flush out the rest of them. I just think maybe just like a new take could happen. My answer was Dorian Gray the last time we went over this,
Which I loved.
because I'm like, we haven't got one in a while, and we were talking about Penny Dreadful. And that's probably the Reeve Carney. Don't get me wrong; he did an amazing job with that. But it was like a snippet, So that's how I saw the answer. Not that I want to squash anything else.
I've got my answer.
Let's hear it.
You've inspired my answer. You said Dorian Gray, and I'm going to go with The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Oh, please. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. That is a piece of garbage that shouldn't exist in the world. And if it had been done differently, maybe it could have been great. But then again, what of Alan Moore's has ever been made that actually lived up to his source material? So
I'm with
maybe
you.
anything
Fair
by Alan
enough.
Moore.
I'm with
I
you.
like it.
And that would need to be, I feel like that would need to be like a 12 episode miniseries.
Yeah,
Right.
maybe.
Done
Yeah.
right. So, okay. That brings us to the end of our movie discussion. But Andy, I'm biting through my knuckle the whole episode long just to ask you what you have that you want to talk about. What projects are on the horizon?
Well, the next book that's coming out is tentatively scheduled for summer 2025, and is very appropriate to our conversation here. It's called The Vampire and the Robot, which takes its title from a poster that's playing at a movie theater in the original Blob, starring Steve McQueen. And when everyone runs out of the theater, that's the poster, starring Bela Lugosi, which this movie doesn't exist. But I've always thought that was such a great idea. Again, the poster has potential. So I thought, well, I'll try to write a book that lives up to that idea. So
that's phenomenal. Okay, so The Vampire and the Robot coming summer 2025.
Hopefully.
Andy, thank you so much for coming on. We truly appreciate it. Shannon, unfortunately, I think she got bumped, but this was so kind of you to come on. And what we'll do is we'll eagerly look for all your works in the future, and we'll promote the hell out of them for you.
Hey, sinners, just a little postscript here. We lost the last 2 minutes of audio with Andy. I promise you, he did say goodbye. He's such a gentleman, and he was an absolute gem. Cannot wait to have him back on the podcast. We're going to bug him to come back and talk about Howard the Duck. That was not an empty threat. I promise you. Please support Andy. His novels are fantastic. Again, they are In the Valley of the Sun, The Boatman's Daughter, and his latest was The Hollow Kind. They are incredible, and I promise you a good, scary time. So thank you, Andy, so much for coming on. We truly enjoyed ourselves.
And this episode is going to drop on Tuesday, February 6th. Again, we had a great time with Andy. I hope you enjoy the episode. And coming up the following week, we're going to be talking to John Langan, author of The Fisherman. And that novel is incredibly scary, and it has been successful in making me scared of all bodies of water. So thanks a lot, John. Appreciate it. I live on an island. There you go. All right, gang. So, Shannon unfortunately got bounced, so I guess I've got to do her job for her. And that is a cut.